The threats of climate change to our planet, our water supply, our food chain, and our survivability are a call to action for people around the globe. We face a dramatically different home in the next generations if we do not take action. But one small island nation with few resources has significantly cut their CO2 emissions through education, increased efficiency, renewable energy, mitigation efforts, and adaptation. Cuba is already facing serious impacts from climate change.
In 2008, in August, September, in that area, there were 3 hurricanes in a period of 20 days and caused a lot of damage there. The big one, it affected Cuba from east to west. It came along the country, doing a lot of damage because the impacts to the houses and to the agriculture were huge.
We are on a small island state, so we are going to be affected by climate change. And in fact, we are affected already, but we are going to lose 3 to 5% of our national territory because of the increase in the level of the sea.
Under the soil and under the rocks, there is a water table. And the water table is like a wedge. We have a little wedge of fresh water, and then there is salt water. That's all there is. So when in places where the sea enters, that wedge of fresh water is getting smaller and smaller. Or in places when irrigation agriculture is like pumping out and pumping out and pumping out and taking that water, there is one moment, finally, that the layer of fresh water disappears and the salt water touch. And then automatically you see like a drastic reduction of the capacity of this soil to sustain agriculture.
Cuba is not first world country, so it's not an Annex 1 country in the Kyoto Protocol. So we do not have to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. But with the Cuban energy revolution, the CO2 emissions per person per year have decreased in 24.5%. Now, on average, every Cuban emits 2.4 tons of CO2 in a year, and it was 3.18 in 1990.
In 2014, Cuba's CO2 emissions per person were 2.5 metric tons. The same year, the emissions in the U.S. were 16.2 tons per person, and people in other developed countries, the OECD, were 9.6 tons. Despite economic limitations, Cuba has set a goal of generating 24% of its electricity from renewable sources by 2030. As a pilot project, Cuba is developing Granma, a province in the eastern part of Cuba, to get all of its electricity from renewable sources.
La revolución energética se hizo cambio también en toda la población, de los equipos de refrigeración, de las cocinas. Se cambiaron millones de lámparas incandescentes por lámparas ahorradoras.
When they changed out the compact fluorescents, they went to every single household and explained to people why they're switching out the light bulbs. It's going to lower your electric bill, but it's also better for the planet. And so that's something that any country can do to educate people. I mean, we have incredible mass media in the United States.
And this saving happened almost overnight, because when you change 9.5 million incandescent bulbs, then we're talking about hundreds of thousands of tons of oil that are not used to produce that electricity. And this is only one result of the Cuban energy revolution, because in 2005 we had more than 200 days in a year with blackouts lasting at least 1 hour. And they went to zero in 2007 after the introduction of distributed generation.
As part of Cuba's energy revolution, distributed generation will increase reliability and decrease waste by locating small energy generation close to where it is needed.
We welcome you to the mini hydroelectric plant.
La misma presta servicio a 68 habitantes.
Benefits 68 inhabitants with a 8 kilowatt capacity production. The idea is to give service and work on the aqueduct system for the community. We built a water reservoir area, so in the moment that the energy is needed, we could use it to keep the plant running.
El mundo sostenible solo será posible si dejamos utilizar en este caso, las energías fósiles y utilizaríamos las energías renovables que provienen del sol, la hidroenergía, la térmica, la propia fotovoltaica, la eólica, la biomasa.
Que este fue el primer consultorio del país que trabajó con energía fotovoltaica. A partir de este se generalizó instalaciones en consultorios, en escuelas, etc. Bueno, este es el pionero de los consultorios en Cuba que trabajó con esta energía y aún se mantiene trabajando con esta energía.
Bueno, aquí en Santiago tenemos 109 consultorios electrificados con energía solar. En el país tenemos 2.302 consultorios electrificados con energía solar. Es importante, y escuelas, tenemos más de 3.000 escuelitas en las montañas, en lugares diversos.
La historia que les voy a contar sucedió en un lugar del mundo.
It's really interesting to work throughout Latin America and then to come to Cuba and see what's going on because it is so different. They've really educated people on this very grassroots level, and in all the schools the kids learn about renewable energy and they learn about energy conservation.
Señor agua cristalina, señor sol calentero, señorita viento ligero.
You can go to the most remote place on the island, or you could go to someone in Havana, and the kids there can tell you all about renewable energies and energy conservation and energy efficiency.
Las nubes y la atmósfera absorben alrededor del 20% y alrededor del 50% de la energía llega a la superficie de la Tierra.
Climate change is a topic for environmental education. Young kids, they're learning and that this is happening and why this is happening.
I'm an 8th grader of this beautiful institution.
Este dispositivo conservamos.
Dijeron también que los muchachos tuvieran concursos. Estos concursos que tuvieron un gran impacto porque eran muy masivos.
Hoy también se puede mover la bobina.
The way to make a sustainable, lasting change has to be done at this grassroots level. And this is really the only place I've seen that on such a huge level. And in other countries, you know, you'll find people working on these issues, but the education of the entire population on these issues just isn't at the same level.
Se le enseña a leer el metro contador. Los muchachos participan también a veces en un hogar con las cuentas, por ejemplo, de lo que ellos gastan en sus casas y que lleven esto de que si ahorran y si no se ahorraron en la casa, si en la escuela se ahorra o no se ahorra, que ellos vayan y lean y todo esto. El metro contador, en el caso, por ejemplo, de la fuente renovable de energía, qué es lo que aporta si es un molino de viento, qué aporta el molino de viento, cuántos metros cúbicos. Entonces se relacionan ahí un programa de que el muchacho también en matemáticas sepa que lo que es un metro lineal, un metro cuadrado, un metro cúbico.
Que es el que se utiliza en las hidroeléctricas.
Now we are using more the media and all the possible ways. When I talk about the media, I include television, radio stations, billboards, newspapers, websites, everything.
Las terrazas means terraces, part of a huge reforestation project carried out in the area since 1968. I mean, when only 40 years ago there were no trees in this area.
We are one of the few countries with a growing area of forests. More than 26% of the Cuban national territory is covered by forests today.
It's one of the few countries that can say it's a steadily growth from 14% to 28%.
We later planted 8 million trees. away teak, mahogany, cedar, ebony, pine, hibiscus, oak, eucalyptus, cecropias.
Nosotros ponemos mucho énfasis en que lo que se hace en el medio ambiente tiene un fundamento científico. Es decir, si se movilizan a determinadas personas de la comunidad para que participen en la siembra de árboles, no es sembrar cualquier árbol, es un estudio de botánicos primero que dicen qué árbol se puede sembrar, porque si no usted puede llevar una especie invasora, que lo que hace es perjudicar el medio, perjudicar la fauna del lugar.
All countries of the world will receive the impact of climate change. So I think that the experiences that Cuba is developing with the Cuban energy revolution could be learned by other countries.
And what Cuba's done with electrifying every single rural school in the country, electrifying all the rural health clinics with solar, and what they've done, especially in the last few years on their energy efficiency, is so extremely important and should be a model for what other countries are doing in the face of climate change and in the face of all the environmental problems that we're facing.
First, we accept the fact that climate change exists and that is already affecting us. And in the short term, there won't be agreements that will allow the rich countries to give some funding to poor countries. You know, that's not happening, and it's very unlikely to happen on that. So there are two things that we can do. One is adapting to climate change and trying to minimize the impacts. And another one is try to mitigate our little emissions, no? So we do what we can. We plant more trees, we try to revegetate the coastal areas, the swamp, the mangroves. And at the same time, the climate change risk analysis is an instrument for planning in Cuba.
Te puedo asegurar que no tenemos otra alternativa. O usamos la fuente renovable o el mundo se destruye mucho más rápido que lo que se está destruyendo.